Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Search with Candour. I am your host, Jack Chambers-Ward. As usual, we're going to do a little bit of something different. Usually, I'd be interviewing the best and brightest minds across SEO and digital marketing, discussing the latest SEO news, discussing hot topics and hot takes with Mark Williams-Cook here in the studio, discussing topics with my colleagues here at Candour here in the studio. I'm going to do something a little bit different. We're gearing up for our first ever conference, SearchNorwichXL, on the 24th of September 2026. And tickets are available now, by the way. But I basically wanted to highlight some fantastic talks we've had at previous Search Norwich events. While this is our first ever full day conference, it's not the first time we've run events. We did quite a few events. We did about 20 of them, in fact, over the last 7 years or so, including a little break for COVID and pandemic stuff. But there were some amazing talks, incredible guests, and I basically wanted to take this opportunity to highlight a couple of those talks here. I'm going to focus on Search Norwich 18 from 2024, the two talks, the two speakers from that fantastic event, which for my money was one of the best Search Norwich events I'd ever been to. And I'd been attending before I'd even actually began, being part of the team. I wasn't even running it for a little while. A colleague of ours, one of our project managers here, Sevi, was running it as well. Did an amazing job. And obviously Mark founded it, and I helped out with the last couple before we started to do Search Norwich XL. Anyway, two phenomenal speakers. I'm basically going to include both talks in this episode of the podcast. So you're going to get a full 40 to 50 minute episode, basically. Each talk is about 20 minutes long. I'm going to kick things off with Crystal Carter from Wix, who I have seen speak at almost every conference I've been to. Speaking at MozCon, speaking at Brighton SEO, speaking at Search Norwich, obviously, this talk coming up. Most recently speaking at WTS Fest London as well. Crystal is an absolutely phenomenal speaker, really knowledgeable in a lot of stuff when it comes to AI search. And I know I discussed a lot of AI search when it came to Google stuff last week. And I was amazed. I rewatched this talk before including it in this episode, and I was amazed at how much of the advice still holds up, 18 months later from the end of 2024 now through to June here in 2026. So much of it still applies. So much of it is still relevant. Crystal's going to talk all about SEO tactics and AI tools for humanizing your content. So it's a great talk that really delved into how you can use AI in a productive way for your content creation, and also remember to humanize it and include that human element at the end of the day as well. Then, to finish things off for this episode, our keynote speaker, our headliner for Search Norwich XL, the one and only Martin Splitt from Google, talking about maybe it isn't JavaScript. It's a brilliant, brilliant talk. I know I've spoken to Martin quite a few times. Again, met at a few different conferences over the years, and Martin delivered a brilliant talk about how if you think it's a JavaScript issue, maybe it's not a JavaScript issue. Don't come crawl into Martin's inbox and say, oh no, I've really ruined this thing with my JavaScript. You might not have done. Might be a different issue. He has some brilliant examples and case studies and runs through that on this episode and in this talk, and he will be doing a future of SEO, the future of the web talk as our keynote at the end of Search Norwich XL. Like I said, you can go to searchnorwich.org or search for us on Eventbrite and get your tickets now. They're just £125 for 8 talks, a panel of 4 amazing experts, fully, drinks, food, all that great stuff, opportunities for networking, to an amazing, beautiful theatre here in Norwich called the Madder Market Theatre. I think you're going to have an amazing time. We're really, really looking forward to it. So yeah, please do get your tickets now if you want to come and see people like Martin speak about SEO here in Norwich. Without any further ado, here is Crystal Carter talking about how to use AI tools and not forgetting to humanize your content from Search Norwich 18.
So yeah, AI for actual intelligence. That's me. It's very humbling to stand next to someone reading your biography that you wrote down on a piece of paper, and they read it off into in front of a bunch of people, in front of a bunch of people. But that's me with my arms folded, because that's how you're supposed to take one of those photos. And yeah, I do lots of stuff and go lots of places, and I'm here. Today, we are going to talk about AI for actual intelligence, and we're going to talk about why it matters in today's AI reality, how to add humanity to your SEO with AI content, and how AI tools can support the process. So why does actual intelligence matter in AI's SEO, or SEO's AI reality? Do you remember back in, before December 2022, when we were all just sort of minding our own SEO business, tending to our own SEO haystacks, before this sort of whirlwind of AI stuff blew into our midst, and we were sort of having a situation where we had ChatGPT, and people were like, I'm not gonna write any more emails, I'm not gonna read any more emails, nothing's ever gonna happen, blah, 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 blah. And everyone, it was a lot of new things, and people sort of realized that we weren't in sort of SEO Kansas anymore, that we were in a new space. And we got from a place where people would find old content, and then that's how we would surface information, and to a place where they'd find old content, and then they would remix it on their end. And that's sort of where we are now. And it felt really, really new, but it's actually not that new. If you look back at the history of SEO and Google and all of that sort of stuff, you'll see that Google's been using AI in search for lots of their tools for years. So Google itself has AI, Google Lens, we've got Google Translate there, and then Google Assistants also use AI. Voice search, which has, I think, is 2024 the year for voice search? Is it 2025? It was 2022 at one point. Yeah, okay, so yeah. So the year for voice search started in 2012, right? We also have featured snippets. Featured snippets have been written by, using AI since 2016. We also have the fact that Google is very happy to combine lots of these different tools. So Google Translate is powered by AI, and they use Google Lens to recognize different elements on a page, and then they'll combine the two so that you can translate a page. And if you're like me, if you're in another country and you need to translate a recipe or the ingredients on an item to see if you can eat it so that you don't aggravate your lactose intolerance, it's really, really useful. So they're happy to combine all of these things, and we're even seeing it with AI overviews, where you have the featured snippets, which include some AI in them, and they're showing up, the content from the featured snippets is showing up within the AI overviews, again, and again, and again. And what we also find is that even as they're bringing in lots of new AI elements, we're still finding that some of the tried and tested methods from SEO are still part of that. So it's not completely new territory when we're thinking about AI, when we're thinking about SEO, when we're thinking about search features, when we're thinking about any of this. We have the tools to move forward. There is a path forward. Because SEO has always been about standing out. And it's always been about adding value. And it's always been about connecting with customer need. So, if I was to ask you a question, I'm going to jump back a second. I'm going to ask the room, how many of you, wonderful marketing professionals, are using AI for your content? Be honest. Okay, that's most people in the room. And this is what we're seeing. I think this particular one was from 2023, and it's only going to be increasing more. And if you look around at your colleagues here, your professional colleagues, most people are using AI. And most people are planning to use AI if they're not using it just yet. And what we find when we look at how people are using AI, you'll see that data analysis, which if I don't have to argue with a spreadsheet, if I can just say, what is the formula for this to ChatGPT, I can see you over there, you're smiling about that, yeah. I will reclaim that time, thank you very much, yes. So the data analysis, cleaning out data, deduping, yes, please, thank you. All of that, great, top use. Second use, content creation. 44.5% of marketers are using AI to create with content. The tricky problem with that, though, is that you're gonna have a lot of content that looks the same, right? And when you have AI in the mix, and with the SERPs and all of that sort of stuff, then that's literally tricky. And that means that if you want to use AI in your content creation process, which we all are, which you all confess that you are using, you have to find a way to stand out, and you have to find a way to differentiate it so that it's not the same. So let's pull back the curtain on all of that. So how do we emphasize human expertise in AI content? Well, we want to lean into experience. We want to show real examples, and we also need to have an opinion. So if we lean into experience, one of the things that I noticed was found was really interesting. So we had ChatGPT hitting 1 million users super, super quickly within weeks of launching. So it was like the fastest app adoption ever. And by December 9th, they had hit a million users. By December 15th, Google added another E to the EAT. They added experience to the EAT. I do not think that is a coincidence. And so we had experience authority or expertise authority and trust, and now experience. And then also, not long after that, they added in Reddit. So if you ask questions like, can a dog help you make friends as an adult? Reddit. How to break in patent leather shoes? Reddit. And you started to see this hockey stick, which we've all seen in the SERPs in our first personal experience, and also there's tons of data to back that up. And we also see it happening in Quora as well. And why? I mean, one of the things I think is interesting, I mean, we all know that Google has a relationship with Reddit, and that's all useful, and I think that that has to do with AI too. But one of the things that's really interesting is that forums are able to offer experience that AI cannot, right? There's historic discussion on forums. If I were to ask them, like, how to break in patent leather shoes, there'll be people who have been asking that question since 2010, since 1999, since all of those sorts of things, historic discussion going all the way back. And they're able to learn from that. They also have input from human perspectives, and they also have queries that can't necessarily be answered with AI. And it's not just Reddit. So we've seen many legacy forums have seen gains. So this is an example of niche forums, for instance. So Reddit is the one on the orange, and then we can see that though they don't have the same traffic as Reddit, Reddit's got millions and millions and millions. If you look at the trajectory when you do a log comparison, you can see that DeviantArt forums following the same. Purse blog is following the same trajectory. In-depth outdoors is following the same trajectory. Community Rick Steves, Fedora, all following the same trajectory. Branded forums are seeing this as well. So you've got Reddit, again in the orange, Discussion Apple following the same trajectory. Monday.com's forum, eBay's forum, Ford Transit USA forum.com. Boom. And one of the things I think is interesting about this is because forums actually have all that EEAT stuff built in, right? So if you go to home improvement Reddit, and let's say you were a girl from Kansas and your storm door got ripped off when there was a tornado just before you got whisked off to the land of Oz. You might go to the Reddit forum, home improvement, and there you can see that this forum has been open since 2008. You can see that it's got this many members, and it's got, it's ranked really highly. You can see the comments there, which will tell you whether or not this is a valuable conversation. You can see upvotes, all of that sort of stuff. All of those things are built in. You can see the expertise, the experience, the authority, and the trust already on that page. And when we look at other places where people are combining forums and AI, for instance, on those LinkedIn articles that LinkedIn's constantly telling you to contribute to, it will tell you that yes, it's written with the help of AI, but it's got insights and advice from real people. And they have those people just declared on the pages, and it helps you figure out. Now you might be saying, I'm not LinkedIn, I'm not Reddit. What can I do with all of that? Well, there's things you can do as well. When Morty Oberstein, my colleague over at Wix, wrote an article on SEJ talking about our SEO course, and we have Andrew in the house who's one of our contributors to the SEO course. Thanks, Andrew. He wrote an article, and on SEJ, what they do is they always tell you how many shares, they always tell you how many reads that particular article has had. This is very similar to what you see on a forum, for instance. So if you have a blog, this is something that you can do as well. They also have author pages, and I know author pages are nothing new at all, but the author pages help to corroborate that information, help build all of that trust, all of that expertise, all of that on the page. Similarly, if you have a blog, a general blog, you can also add this. This is a Wix site that we always roll out because it does so well, and this blog, for instance, has 103,000 views. If I was interested in sweeteners, I'd be like, I'm gonna give that a try. I'm gonna have a look. Why? Because it's got social proof there. This is another blog that's also on a Wix website, and this has comments. So you have your blog here, you also have the comments, just like you would on a forum. You have your comments, you have your likes, you have all of that sort of information. So when you're able to differentiate with experience, even if you're using AI content for the core of your content, you can add in those signals to help people see that you have experience, that you have named experts who are contributing to your content, that you have social proof across your content, that people enjoy this content, regardless as to whether it was made from AI or not. And if you are using AI, just like they do on LinkedIn, you should declare your AI contribution. Another one is showing real examples. So let's say you were a girl from Kansas and you were going to take your dog on a trip. You might ask, can dogs go in airplane cargo? Is that something that you can do? And yeah, Google's going to give you the AI overview. They're also going to give you a link to a page. And when you go into that page, even if this content is made using support of AI, they've included first-person information here. First-person primary source information. Me and my dog Django go everywhere. We do this. We go here. We do that. And then later on it says, I've flown here. Django can fly with us. And he sits at our feet and all of that sort of stuff. And what we see is that with content, even if you're using AI, you should include primary resource content that's unique. This is a great example from Spruce Pets, where they had lots of dog carriers, for instance, like the kind you might take on a plane. And they have tons of primary source images from their team. So this is lots of people with their dogs and a carrier. And then they've got lots of, like, this is how the dog experienced all of that. And then they pair that with content that could be created with AI really, really easily, like an FAQ, for instance. Similarly, if you look at like best portable dog water bowls, for instance, this is another piece of content from Dog Rescue, and they have, again, unique primary source content that includes lots of individual images that are unique to them, and they've got lots of different stories of the dogs using the things, but they also have content that could very easily be created by AI that's built in there, that's sort of product comparisons. So they're pairing the two. They're pairing the primary content, which is absolutely unique to them, with content that can be created with AI. So they're not leaving just one or the other, they're pairing the two. So when you illustrate, you're also able to differentiate your content. So you should be using unique content in your examples. You should be using a selection of examples. So when you're showing lots of different elements across, you should show lots of different people, lots of different ways that people are experiencing the content. And also balance AI explainers like FAQs, like tables, like summaries, with primary source information. Next, you should think about having an opinion. So robots don't have opinions. They don't care whether or not pineapple should go on pizza. Now, I know that pineapple should not go on pizza because you would never, ever, ever have pineapple with tomato sauce. It's just wrong, people. It's just wrong. You're shaking your head, but you're wrong. My opinion's correct. So this is what I'm saying. My husband thinks Brussels sprouts are the devil. You say JavaScript's the devil, my husband thinks Brussels sprouts are the devil. I quite like them. But my point is that robots have no opinion about pizza or Brussels sprouts, right? They just don't. Humans do. And there's some content where only humans can answer that question, because really it's kind of an eternal question. We always ask the question about, well, do you like pineapple on pizza, because we know it's one of those questions. And it's fun to have that conversation. So if someone was to ask, is Somewhere Over the Rainbow a happy or sad song? Google is doing its best to answer this with an AI overview. They're like, it's a sad song. And then they're like, oh, it's a song about someone who wants to go both home and on an adventure. And then they've got the thing on the side that says, why Somewhere Over the Rainbow takes us to a magical musical place, right? Then when we get further down the SERP, we see the featured snippet is saying it's about both longing and hope. Then we go to unpopularopinion.com, they're saying it's profoundly depressing. Then we go to another one and say, oh, it's about hope. Then we go to this one and it says it's one of the top 6 songs to play at a funeral. Now, Google can't really decide whether this song is happy or sad. For a while, they were ranking this one from Quora, and what I thought was interesting about this was that they skipped over the AI assistant entirely, and they went straight to this one, which was, explaining how this person felt about it, and they're saying, it's a simple song, they're saying it's a bit mixed, basically. And the thing that had the most upvotes was this one from Kamakawila Ole, Israel Kamakawila Ole, singing on his ukulele, which is just a beautiful version if you've never heard that version. But my point is that essentially when you get into the space of a question that needs multiple answers or a question that has a lot of nuance, people are more likely to actually click on your content because it's not a yes or no answer. And if you are able to have an opinion on something that's more rich, then you're more likely to get that click. So when I think about this, it's a little bit like when I think about this song, whether it's Judy Garland or whether it's Patti LaBelle or whether it's Ariana Grande singing in her bedroom or singing in her kitchen, I don't really care what the bot thinks. I don't care what the robot thinks or what ChatGPT thinks about whether or not this song is happy or sad. I just know when I hear this song, it just gives me the feels, and I really like it. So opinionate to differentiate. Add opinions into your content. Even if you're using AI to help you clean it up, even if you're using AI to make it happen in the end, add your opinion. Don't shy away from them, because this builds, this builds engagement. This makes it more likely that people are going to click. It makes it more likely that people are going to be searching for conversations around this. And engage with complex topics. Don't be afraid of that. And invite discussion. So how AI tools can support this process? So AI opens up time and resources to tell human stories better. All of that stuff about doing like primary source content, getting those pictures, doing all of these tests, running all of that stuff, that takes time. That takes time and resources. And it can be really tricky to pull through all of that, but AI can really help you with that. So if you're thinking about showing experience, you want to think about adding in UGC signals and also adding in quotes. Well, you want to get quotes from subject matter experts on whatever project you're working on. AI transcribers are a game changer for that. AI transcribers can make such a big deal, make such a big difference for helping you do that. Adding in like share buttons, author pages, that's all stuff that you can build into your code. You probably already have that in your website as well, but getting those quotes can be really make a really big difference and help you to add in nuance and uniqueness into the AI content that you're generating really, really quickly and really easily. Illustrating what you're doing with unique images and summaries, this is really great. But again, AI image enhancers can help you take, so let's say somebody is out in the middle, in the wild, and they've got that great photo that's in shot, but maybe it's a little bit blurry, maybe it's not the right size, maybe it's like this, maybe it's like that. Your AI image enhancers can help you with that. When you've got content and somebody's written something and it's really great, you can use AI tables and TLDRs and things like that to help summarize it to make it easier for bots to read. You can have AI help you make visualizations and things like that. And also, when you're thinking about having an opinion, you can also use AI to help you with videos, for instance. That can be really useful. AI tags for SEO to just make sure that everything's tidy and working all well. And social media. Social media is a great place for having conversations, and that's really useful. And another one, just a shout out to something I spent a lot of time on, the user-first keyword ideation worksheet. I was talking to somebody earlier, I was talking to you about precisely this. And basically, we have so many primary sources for keywords, for content ideation, for things like that. Talking to your sales team, your Slack channel even, training gaps, Google Business Profile questions, webinar questions. We have webinars every month. We've got another one coming up next week. And we get thousands of questions asked at us every time. And it used to be a real chore trying to go through all of those questions. Well, guess what? I can take all those questions, I can put them through a tool, and I can say, tell me the top 10 questions from this. Boom. And then I've got something that's really valuable for everybody, and it's really quick, and it's really useful. And that's primary source stuff that's using the AI to make the human content better. And I'm such a fan of this. I started using this week. I don't know, who are other people who are using NotebookLM and are obsessed with it? I'm completely, it's my favorite. So NotebookLM, if you haven't tried it, do. And basically you go, you log in, and then you can upload whatever you want. And it's your private little corner of LLM loveliness. And basically, let's say you do that interview with that subject matter expert, you can upload that to it. Then you can also upload the transcript to it. Then you can also upload, maybe the documentation that's related to that, and you can also upload whatever else you need. And then you can ask it questions. You can have it help you create content. You can have it help you tidy all of those things up. And these AI tools can help you take that primary content that is unique to you and make it more relevant and make it easier to turn into web content that's useful for everybody. If you're interested in the content ideation worksheet, which again has lots of different elements through it and has lots of ways for you to collect content from various different things, you can download it here, and then you can use NotebookLM to help you do more cool stuff with it. It's super fun. I'll leave that for there if anybody wants to see it. So that's super useful. When we think about illustrating, this is what I did. Isn't he cute? He's cute, right? This is my Toto. This is my neon Toto. So basically, sometimes you've got this content, and sometimes you're working in a vertical that's not very sexy, and there aren't cute pictures. It happens. It does totally happens. And AI image creators can really be a game changer for that. I've done another video. There's no other reason why I have this one other than I thought he was cute. So and it's my presentation, so I'll do that. And this is another example of, again, let's say you get some of that primary content and you just want to touch it up a little bit, make it a little bit cleaner. Within our Wix SEO and Wix Studio tools, we have these tools built in. So for instance, we have the image generator built into the Wix. We also have the object eraser that's built into it as well. I used this the other day to touch up a photo of mine, which was very of myself, which was very fantastic. But yeah, it will erase images for you or will erase elements for you and make things better there. Let's say somebody goes, again, they get that primary source content for you and it's not the right size, and if you scale it up, it makes everything blurry. Within the Wix Studio and Wix image updates and image tools, we also have an ability to upscale your image with AI, so you can take it up, twice, 3 times as big. Another one that I really, really love, because graphic designers sometimes get very upset if you bother them for something that is seemingly small. You know my pain. You know when you're like, I just need this. And they're like, but I'm an artiste. And you're like, I know you're an artiste, but please, can you just help me? Yeah, exactly, precisely. Well, you don't have to use Canva because we have it built into Wix if you're using Wix. So yeah, I love this one. This is really, really good. If you have a landscape and you want a portrait, if you have a portrait and you want a landscape, it's really, really great. And AI can help you move faster with all of these sorts of elements. So when you're thinking about having opinion, those opinion pieces are great. You need to get moving with the AI. Let's say you want to get that opinion piece out straight away, and let's say they wrote it in the middle of the night. Well, we have tools that are built in that help you have your AI meta description and your AI title tag built in, so we got you covered before you come back and maybe optimize it some more yourself. So that's a tool that's built in as well. And then also, if you're thinking about telling the world, with an unsolicited SEO tip maybe, about your opinion, then we also have AI that can help you do your social media text. And again, that's something that can help you get going, help you get started, to help with that blank page element. And also, if you're going to do the video that's telling everyone about your opinion, there are AI video tools as well. And I think if you're able to harness all of these AI tools, and you're able to get everything working together to help you to make your content more distinct, more unique, even when you're using AI, then you should find you're somewhere over the rainbow. And with that, I thank you.
Wasn't that brilliant? Crystal is always a fantastic speaker. Crystal's been on the show a couple of times already. I hope you enjoyed that talk as much as I did when I rewatched it and when I was in attendance as well. And like I said at the top of the episode, the one and only Martin Splitt saying, maybe it isn't JavaScript. Maybe it's your problem. Here is Martin's talk from Search Norwich 18 ahead of his keynote at SearchNorwichXL on the 24th of September later this year.
All right, thanks a lot, Mark. It is amazing to be here. And it was surprisingly good remembering how it was to drive or be on trains in Germany. The train system here is all right, I guess. Switzerland, different league, but okay, that's not. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about trains today. I'm here to talk about JavaScript. Because oftentimes, it seems to me, as someone on the Google side of things, that SEOs look for clues that allow them to blame things they are seeing on JavaScript, and then they show up, or someone from their team shows up on my in my inbox or on my social media, and it's just we found a bug, it's JavaScript. You say JavaScript works in Google search, but we have a strong hint that it doesn't, and it's because of JavaScript. And have you considered that maybe it isn't? Because most of the times it isn't. I get these like hundreds of times per year, and so far, year to date, there was exactly one problem that was presented to me as a JavaScript problem that actually was a JavaScript problem. And not only that, it was actually a bug in our web rendering service, and Mark is the person who found it. So good job. Well done, well done. You got the one that actually was JavaScript, so that's pretty cool. But I want to give you a glimpse of or into the things that I usually get presented with as a JavaScript problem that turns out not to actually be a JavaScript problem. So let's have a look. First things first, I once had this chat with Jamie Indigo, I think it was on SEO Mythbusting, where she asked me, is JavaScript the devil? To which I say, it depends. And what does it depend on? Well, if it actually is a JavaScript problem, and if you're using it wrong, then yes, it can actually hurt your website and your users. So JavaScript can be used for terrible, terrible things, but JavaScript gives you superpowers, and with superpowers comes big responsibility. So it's not always just JavaScript to blame. Sometimes it's those who use it, those who wield the weapon. If you're not sure if something is a JavaScript problem, then the very first stop should be Google Search Console, where you can inspect the URL, you can test the live URL, you can see what we saw when we crawled the page and indexed it or didn't index it. And then in there you have the HTML, and that HTML isn't just what your server sends, it is what we got after rendering. So when your content is there and the HTML looks like what you expect it to look like, and you know there's like a little search, I know I'm not supposed to run here, but I'm doing it anyway. So if you like use the little search button, or if you want to copy it and paste it into your code editor of choice to then look into it further, you can do that as well. But basically use that rendered HTML as your source of truth. That's what Google search sees when it comes to this URL. And whatever is there, and we're going to look at it. So if there's like something that tells us not to index something, or if there's content missing, then we are not seeing it. All right. There's also more info that gives you more info. That is very, very helpful, like what happened in JavaScript console messages, what happened in the network. So that's your first stop. And if your content is there, and it's what you expect it to be, then it's very likely not going to be JavaScript that is causing the problem. And that, if people were doing that, just that, which I think is very basic, but, if people were doing that, 90% of the people showing up in my inbox would not show up in my inbox, because that's what I do, and I use also the rich results test because I don't necessarily get access to your, no one gives me access to their Search Console accounts. I wonder why. But okay, and you can use the view rendered HTML here as well, and you get the same idea. And usually that's exactly where our interaction stops, because I basically just go like, and then that solves the problem, so apparently. But sometimes, you know, people come with problems, and here they tell me, well, I did that, Martin, and the problem is that the browser sees all the beautiful cats we have on our website, but for some reason, Google doesn't. And I'm not showing the HTML. In this case, I'm actually using screenshots, but you should have looked at the HTML, really. And in this case, you look at the HTML and you see like, okay, no cats whatsoever, so what is happening here? And if you look at it and people tell you, oh, this is a client-side rendered application, then clearly JavaScript must be the problem here, because all these cats are actually being loaded with JavaScript. So I must be lying, because I tell people it works. If you use client-side rendering, it's fine for Google search. But clearly it is not. So it must be a JavaScript problem, and it must be a Google problem. Maybe it's even a bug in Google. That's actually surprisingly many of the people who end up in my inbox suspect it is a Google bug. And I'm like, really? Your website that is like a store for very specific products in a very specific place is affected by a bug that is in Google and does not affect any of the other websites out there. That's interesting. It happens sometimes. Mark was one of those cases. But like most of the time, it's not us, it's you. So let's have a look. Haha! Oh, what does my eye see here? JavaScript console messages, there's a message there. Well, case closed, it's JavaScript. Especially if you look at it like, oh, there's an error. Oh my God, unexpected end of JSON input. Ooh. So messages in there, in the JavaScript console, even error messages, don't necessarily mean that that is the culprit. Right? It can be like some optional component. It can be something that does not influence the content on the page, throwing errors here. So just the presence of a JavaScript error here does not mean that there is a problem. Interestingly enough, it said like end of JSON input. So now if you look at the application later on, you see that JSON is the format that they use to transfer the list of cats. That then actually triggers additional requests for loading the actual pictures of the cats and all that kind of stuff. So it is a bit weird, but that does sound like a backend problem. And I'm not sure what the problem with the backend is. So let's go back to more info and actually go to page resources. And we notice that there's one that couldn't be loaded. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a problem. If this is like a tracker, like an analytics tracker or something, then whatever. If this is a web font, who cares? Like a lot of stuff cannot be loaded and doesn't matter really for Google, because what font your text is in doesn't really matter to us, for instance. So, but let's see what hasn't been loaded. Oh, look at that. The API hasn't been loaded. And look at why it hasn't been loaded. Googlebot blocked by robots.txt. Now, if you were to block your product detail pages from Googlebot by using robots.txt, be it JavaScript or not JavaScript, what would happen? Good things or bad things? Probably not what you want, right? So that's exactly what happened here. Someone tried to be clever. Was like, oh, we're wasting crawl budget on the API. No, the API is what actually builds the page. So the content comes from the API. So if you're blocking Googlebot, what actually happens is that we can't make an API call. We cannot get the cats from the server. And then we get like this gnarly message here. And then we get sadness. All right, I want cats, and I get sadness. I get an empty page. And that's what happens here, and it's not the JavaScript. The JavaScript is just experiencing a problem because something couldn't be fetched from your server, and that's because someone tried to be clever when they very clearly were not. All right? So do not block any critical resources, and that includes API calls that are necessary to load content, because bots, like Googlebot, actually have to fetch these to see the content that they are providing to the page. So if you are blocking things in robots.txt, that's not a JavaScript problem. That is a you problem. I'm very sorry. All right? I mean, if you block things that you want to block in robots.txt, good job. Well done. Bless your heart. But here in this case, not great. Not fantastic. OK, but then, you know, we have other cases. And Mark might listen up here. No index detected in robots meta tag, which was pretty much what he discovered. But in that case, in his case, we fucked up. So here we have a website that is not showing up in the index, and it clearly should. Mark, can I tell the story of what happened there? It was quite interesting. I don't have slides for that, but I find it quite interesting. And now that I see his face, it reminds me of like, anyway, what happened there is that fundamentally he noticed that pages showed up in the index that were no indexed, and out of the blue they started being indexed. And he's like, huh? Did we remove the no index? No, the no index is here. I don't understand the problem. And the no index was added with JavaScript, which I wrote the documentation for that it's fine. And it was fine. Back in the days when I came in 2018, it was fine. 2019, when I checked the last time, it was still fine. At some point I lost interest because it clearly works. In, what was it, July, it stopped working. And I debugged it, and I'm like, you know, from experience, I'm like, let's see where they screwed up this time. They didn't. We did. And I asked the rendering team to figure out what was going on there, and we traced it, and we found out that there was a function that we use that was supposed to do one thing, completely unrelated to robots meta tags, but also happened on the way to kind of pass by the drive-in for robots information and kind of like got that in as well. So by the roadside, we picked up robots information in that function as well. But the function basically says something completely different, and I could probably say what the function was called. It was called get redirect info. So the function's purpose was to figure out if this page redirected and get information on the redirect chain. As part of that, it kind of accidentally also got, well, not accidentally, but like it also additionally got information if something on the road there, be it a redirect or the actual original page if there were no redirects, is roboted, or we have something that says no index. Okay, cool. But then some engineer came in and said, like, this function is really slow and the code is really clunky. We need to clean this up. Good initiative. I like that. But then you look, you don't see the whole picture. You look at this piece of code in isolation. It says, like, get redirect info. So what this function needs to do is get redirect information. So it refactored it. They rewrote the code, made it very elegant, very fast, very nice. But also, it only did what it said it would do. It got redirect information. It stopped giving us the information about no index and no follow and all these kind of things if they were added in with JavaScript, because that was what this function kind of also picked up on. So now we had this function. We still got the data for those cases where it was in the initial HTML. We did no longer get the data for cases where JavaScript was involved. And that's why that mistake, this bug happened on our end. And we could fix it by just calling a slightly different function that also actually gives us the robot information, or calling an additional function that also gives us this information. And then we fixed it. So someone else goes like, haha, we have the same problem because we get a no index detected in robots meta tag when there is none, which is the opposite of the bug, but okay. Let's have a look. Oh yeah. Oh no. Oh, this must be us, because clearly there's no meta robots in here. Except, and I debugged this with them, and I'm like, okay, this might actually be us, because like they went to Search Console, and they saw in the rendered HTML there is no index, no robots, no index. But then, while I was trying to debug what was happening, I was not seeing us picking it up either. Like the debugging that I used was like, there's no robots, no index. This is fine. This is safe. Except every now and then, it did pick up a no index, and I'm like, what is this happen? What's happening on our end? Until eventually, in the browser, I reloaded the page a few times, and eventually, you know, after being like, what the hell happens here? I got this. Wait a minute. So I kept refreshing, and every roughly 10th time, sometimes 11 reloads, sometimes 9 reloads, but roughly every 10th time, I got a meta robots no index. I asked them, so do you have like any A/B testing running? Do you have anything that could sometimes add a no index here? No. Okay. Are you using like anything in between your server and the browser or the client? Because this is not just the browser, this is also affecting bots. No, not that I'm aware of. Okay. So I dug a little deeper and I was like, this is weird. But it's clearly not a mistake on our end, because every now and then we do see a no index. And unfortunately, if that happens to be the next crawl, we would remove it from the index. Okay. And then I looked at what we got. So the browser, in this case, where we have a no index, gives me all this crap. And that's a lot of stuff. But I asked again, so what's your setup like? And they're like, well, we have like some sort of hosting, and then that's it. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting, because are you sure about that? Because here, if I look closely, I see a few things. I see these headers are non-standard. The CF thing is something that is not standard, and I happen to know that this is Cloudflare, and sure enough, the server that actually serves me is Cloudflare. And I'm not saying this because I want to shit on Cloudflare. This could have happened with any other service that you might put in between your server and your users. Could be like your own proxy, your own cache, could be a firewall, could be another CDN provider. Cloudflare is actually one of the really nice ones that are usually very, very fast in fixing bugs if they have them. And we tell them there's a problem. There's others where they're like, who are you? And we're like, okay. And the interesting thing is that what I noticed is whenever, so I don't know how Cloudflare works internally. So whatever this is probably tells us where it's coming from in their infrastructure, because AMS sure does look like a very popular data center location, which is Amsterdam. And I noticed that whenever Amsterdam was involved in these CF ray values, or AMS, I'm guessing is Amsterdam, I don't know, then we actually did get a Noindex, and with everything else, we didn't. So sometimes I got other values there, I can't remember what they were, but like sometimes I get another value there with a different three-letter code at the end, and surprisingly then, I would not see a Noindex. And then I asked the person who runs the website again, so like, what are you doing? Are you using Cloudflare? And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. I asked 2 times if there's anything in between. But all right, Cloudflare works for me, that's fine. So could you purge their cache? Because they have an option to kind of delete whatever Cloudflare stores in between and make sure that it gets served fresh from their servers, because maybe on their servers it's fine, I don't know. And turns out, yeah, it was fine on their servers, and actually after they purged the cache, they no longer had the erroneous Noindex showing up. So again, what looked quite clearly as some sort of weird JavaScript glitch at first, because the rest of the website was like all JavaScript. I kind of faked the screenshot there. There was lots of JavaScript doing lots of funky things. But it turned out that in the end, it was just their CDN provider caching incorrectly, which can happen. That's fine, but it's not a JavaScript thing. So another thing that you should probably do whenever you're seeing really weird, funky things happening is you should compare between the moments where it doesn't happen and the moments where it does happen, what you get in these response headers, because that's the meta information that your server gives whenever you make or your browser makes a request. And sometimes you find interesting things in here that tell you like, oh, there's something weird going on. Here's a bunch of caching involved. In this case, we didn't load from a cache. I don't even know what this varnish cache is and where that comes from, but there's a bunch of stuff going on in this request, and it wasn't JavaScript in the end. Okay. So we had that. But wait, someone else came to me with a problem, and they said, haha, but this might be JavaScript, right? Because for some reason, in our single-page application, our error pages can sometimes show up in search results. I said, that's annoying. We have a thing called the software for detection, and we're trying to avoid this situation as good as we can. If you give us a very clear error message like this one, normally it doesn't slip through. Here, for some reason, it actually did slip through. You could consider that a bug on our end, but there's something fundamentally wrong with your website if that happens. So let's go to that URL. Okay, that looks very much like an error page, right? So what's happening there? So I opened the developer tools and I looked at what happens on the network. And oops, that's a 200 OK from the server. That's a bit of a problem. If your website gives us a 200 OK for something that is an error page, as I said, we are trying to catch that. But really, you're not doing yourself any favors here. Your server should not be like, yes, this page exists, all good, when the page looks like that. That is not good. And that's something, unfortunately, that happens very quickly if your developers are holding it wrong a little bit. And I would not necessarily blame them for it, because the tutorials normally, on the documentation, normally don't explain it. So if you build single-page applications, the biggest problem is that developers believe, front-end developers specifically, believe that that's nice because you no longer have to configure much on the server. The server just always serves the index.html file, and then the JavaScript works out the content. And how that looks is like this. So somewhere in the page, you make a network call to a URL that looks something like that. So we have like an api.martinscheese /cheese, and then the ID of the cheese that you're going to. So if you're like going to Martin's cheese /camembert, for instance, then it would make this specific call, like /cheese/camembert, and then it would wait for the response to come back. The second line doesn't matter that much. The third line is interesting because that's when the cheese information comes back. And then we look at, does this cheese exist? And if the API encounters something, if I go like LOL, OMG, WTF, BBQ, and then it would go like /cheese/that, then obviously I don't have a cheese that's called that, and this cheese doesn't exist. And if the cheese does not exist, that's the does not exist, then we show an error page. The problem is at that point, the server has already had to respond to something to service this HTML and JavaScript. And as the server is no longer part of what the developers consider to be important, they just said it like, yeah, just serve the index HTML, whatever. So the HTTP 200 is already out, and we can't change that. It's the server response code. So the server has sent a response. It always sends a 200 OK response, and now we can't do much about it. But it doesn't really matter because the user sees the error message, we are fine, right? Except that for bots, this really isn't great because we are now have to figure out, or we're now the ones who have to figure out that this is actually an error and not something that you would like us to see and put potentially in the index as well. And people tell me that that's why single page applications or client-side rendering does not work for SEO. That's not true. It just doesn't work that way, but there is a solution, and it's a very simple solution. Configure one URL on the server that actually serves a 404 and just redirect to it. So now you have an actual full-blown, still looking the exact same error message and error page, but your server can actually serve a 404. And what we see in Google search is like, okay, so we're getting this page, oh, it redirects us to this other page, oh, that page is a 404, so then this page is a 404. There we go, end of story. Done, problem solved. It's not the greatest way of doing that, but it's one way that definitely works and is absolutely fine from our perspective. And it's definitely better than serving us a 200 and then still showing an error message. So this is pretty good. And that means you can fix these kind of applications and you can fix these kind of problems pretty reasonably well. Which brings me to my summary. Yeah, sometimes it is JavaScript, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a problem that can't be solved. And actually here the solution to the problem that JavaScript brought upon us was JavaScript. Oh, the irony. And actually, if you're holding it right, it wouldn't have been a problem in the first place. And that's what I'm trying to combat. And I try to help with that by going to developer events as well and talk to developers about these things because they genuinely don't know. But that also means that there's a very good chance that your developers don't know something that you could potentially know by reading our documentation and using our tools. And you could teach them as well. It makes your life easier, it makes their life easier, it makes your users' lives easier, it makes everyone's life easier. It's great. If you find something that does not work or doesn't work the way that you expected or that leaves you with questions with regards to JavaScript, talk to me. I'm very visible online. I'm also very visible here tonight. So please do come on, talk to me about it. I won't shame you, I won't yell at you. I didn't name any names of the people who gave me these wonderful examples involuntarily. And I genuinely want to make the JavaScript documentation better. And I keep hearing people saying like, oh, we need more documentation in this. And then I come back with a follow-up question like, what would you like documented that isn't documented right now? And they all go silent online for some reason. I'm not sure if I'm intimidating, is it the German? I don't know. I don't know if it's that, but I promise I'm a nice person and I'm very, very willing to help, but just tell me what is missing in our documentation. Speaking of that, please use the tools that we have. Check out the crawl page, check out the rendered HTML, check for more information in the More Information tab. These things really, really do help, especially if you can compare the HTTP header. This actually also in more info for the page resources, it shows you the headers as well that you got from the server. And you can compare these to the ones that you do in the live URL test And then you see like, is this something that happened when it was last crawled? Because here the crawl was a few days ago, for instance, and maybe the developer fixed the problem in the meantime. You would see that in the live URL test. So please do use these tools. And with that, I think we're open for questions.
And that wraps up this week's episode. I know it's a little bit something different. Of course, I'll get back to having amazing guests, having regular conversations with some of the most brilliant minds in SEO very, very soon. But I've been doing a little bit of experimenting, trying different formats and trying different content. In case you hadn't seen either of those talks, I wanted to give them a bit of a highlight and a refresh and see what you thought of them, basically. Hopefully you enjoyed Martin's talk. If you want to come and see Martin talk, please come and join us in September. Check out SearchNorwichXL. You can search us on Eventbrite. You can find us at searchnorwich.org. All those places, of course, come and check us out. And in the meantime, like I said, I'll be back very soon with more conversations with brilliant guests. I've got people like Laura Yanku coming up. I've got people like Sean Barber coming up. Of course, I'll be having conversations with people like Mark Williams-Cook again, and plenty of other guests coming up over the next few weeks and months. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week.